All right. Hello and welcome to the Raptor Circus Feedback Podcast. Today we'll be discussing my game, which is Hunger Games. And for those of you who didn't know, I have a character that is introducing my fellow workers. We have Josh Jones, also known as Razor.
Hello.
I have Josh Sutphin
Hello.
and Lyle Cox.
Hi.
All right. And with that, I will get us on our document here. And we're going to zoom in. All right. So I just came up with this game not too long ago. I kind of have this idea of trying to keep with the whole not having violence be the main theme since it is so common in video games. Um, but there's lots of really fun games that use violence, like first-person shooters, for example. And that's what this is kind of based off of. Is not really changing first-person shooters, just kind of changing the metrics by which they run by. So in this game, my plan is to have projectiles be food, and dead enemies are just in a food coma. And I know you guys have looked over this, and what I'm looking for is like, is this a good proof of concept as far as the demo you played, and is it a good proof of concept as far as like the theme? I guess that's the first thing that I see back.
So I'll chime in there. I think uh, you're it's pretty unique, especially the specific target audience you have set up there. I must have missed that before, but the doing a first-person shooter is one of the most comprehensive and typical 3D game programming scenarios, and so I think as far as your first goal there, it will fit that really well. And I like the idea that you're going to challenge yourself with the theme of making it non-violent. Uh, but from what I've seen of the demo so far, there's probably a lot more you could go down that route if you wanted to make that a focus.
Yeah, so I actually have a little spoiler down at the bottom. If you guys haven't looked at this recently, we have some starting character art. This is actually the first enemy in the game. So the stuff I have in there is very placeholder right now. It actually looks like typical first-person shooter stuff, but with the this character added in here, this character, what it does is it explodes when it gets near you. And the explosion effect right now really looks like a bomb went off. But what I'm actually gearing it toward is to be like a pinata just blew up. There'll be candy flying everywhere, that sort of thing.
Did you ever play Viva Pinata?
Yeah, that had a little bit to do with with the guy you see here.
If you can achieve the aesthetic joy of that game in an arcade shooter, I will love you forever. I miss that game. That game was so rad.
Another inspiration is probably like that. There's a new indie game out called Lovely Planet where you just are shooting things before they hit the floor, and everything's got like emoticon faces. But yeah, I just want feedback on whether. Well, first of all, I want feedback on whether like the proof of concept I said works, and if you think there's any problems with the theme.
So I think Your target audience is a good reference to go off of for what you want to accomplish. I think your theme of all weapons are food, and all dead enemies are just asleep, is perhaps more restrictive than it needs to be. Maybe you could change it to just non-violent, right? Because there's a lot of ways to subdue things without violence. That doesn't, like, you don't just have to replace bullets with food, is what I'm saying, right? There's different things you can do that are maybe more interesting, right? You can drop items that are distractions, or toys. You can do a whole bunch of things that aren't like shooting it out of a gun. You can maybe there's an enemy that's really angry, and you have to sneak up behind it, and you have to like pet it, and then if you pet it or rub its belly or something, right, then he's like no longer angry, and you've subdued.
It's like Sneak King.
Sneak King. I still own a copy of that.
Nice.
I'm very proud of it. It seems to me one of the really obvious, like, I feel like what you're doing is saying, you're saying you want to have shooting mechanics, but so the mechanics are inherently violent at that point, but then you want to sort of paper over the violence with the non-violent theme. But what if you thought about having non-violent mechanics that still kinesthetically feel like shooting? The obvious example of this is photography, right? You're pointing and shooting, but instead of firing a bullet out and killing an enemy, you're clicking the shutter on the camera. But it's the same kinesthetic experience. You're running around, you're aiming, right? Accuracy matters. Your positional relationship to your target matters, right? If you're too close, if you're too far away, if there's cover or whatever, obstructions in between. You still have the same situation of having to lead a moving target or whatever. Or not lead a moving target, but track a moving target. If you wanted to do like leading a moving target, you could move into like using like a tranquilizer gun. Like you could be like, if you've got a bunch of like pinata style animals, you could be like the pinata animal veterinarian who has to tranquilize animals who need to have their exams done, or have their shots so that they don't get horrible diseases. I don't know. I'm kind of riffing. But I don't know that just papering over the inherently violent mechanic of I have a gun and I'm shooting and destroying an enemy with a theme that's, you're still doing the same thing, but you're shooting food and death is sleep, but everyone's going to kind of see through it. I think you could achieve the goal of non-violent gameplay more strongly if you tried to achieve it in both mechanics and theme.
Yeah, I have to agree. I totally was thinking the same thing there. That actually throwing food, just the act of throwing almost anything is a violent act inherently. So, but yeah, some of the other ideas that may be of value to you, or something like imagine how Portal worked and how it achieved nonviolence. You could do other things, like you are holding a laser pointer and you're distracting the cats or something, or maybe you have a hollow gun and it creates an image of food, and you use that to lead people to where you want them to go instead. It's really hard to not do something violent when inherently, when you're in a game, you have some kind of goal, you have some kind of conflict you want to resolve. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what you do, how you solve that particular opposition.
And part of it might be me trying to combine two things that I want to do together. If we go down here to weapons, you can see I use the word projectile, and by projectile I mean it is physically in the scene for a moment and then does whatever it does when it hits its target.
Right, as opposed to like a raycast or whatever.
Yes. And I might be trying to shoehorn in two ideas here. This idea of just having a shooter game where all of the bullets are physical objects for a little while before they terminate. And maybe these two things just don't go together, because as Vaser said, the act of throwing something, no matter what it is a violent act. And if you throw a pillow at somebody, it's still violent.
Yeah, well, but it's fine if you just want to theme it non-violently and still go with it. Like, you can still accomplish most of your goals here, I think.
Yeah. And also you can change the mechanics so that it's not an aggressive throw. Like, you limit rate of fire, and it's like a lob thing, and so it's not aggressive anymore. You're like tossing food into their mouths, and then it's a different type of game. It's no longer a twitch shooter reaction fire thing. It's more like heavy bullets, where you have to be more deliberate with what you're doing.
Skee-ball.
Yeah.
I want to ask, since you sort of shined a light on it just there, or put a focus on it, you've put this focus on having projectiles as opposed to hit scan weapons. And so typically in shooters, like, that's a really deliberate decision for one of two reasons. Either A, because you want to emphasize the skill-based gameplay of leading a moving target with a bullet that has travel time. Like, there's a whole skill of leading a target, right, which you don't have to deal with a hit scan weapon. Or you want to create an experience kind of like classic Doom and stuff like that, where the enemies are firing slow-moving projectiles at you, and so actually dodging their projectiles becomes important. Whereas if your game is hit scan focused, like a Call of Duty or something, you become much more focused on just getting behind cover. Are one or both of those specifically your goal, or do you have another reason why you're deciding to focus on physical projectiles?
I would say the second one, where things are where you're dodging enemy projectiles. I want that to be focused. Now, the first enemy in here does not do that. It's more like the enemy itself is a projectile that you're dodging.
Mm-hmm.
Are your enemies gonna have guns, or are they just like, are they gonna be hostile enemies? Like, there's one direction you could take with this, is you have hideous, ugly, hostile enemies, and you please them with your cupcakes and burritos, and then they become like cutesy, happy.
And they follow you around like Pikmin, and you have an animal army.
Well, yeah, that's interesting, because then I could just have them like go like hang out in the arena until everyone else is happy, and then maybe they all leave the level, and then you have to take care of a new wave of hungry foes, as it were. Maybe not asleep is the best way to put it. Maybe a better way to put it is like satiated or something.
Pacified, satiated, yeah.
Tamed.
Yeah, and I'm like
monster tamer.
Yeah.
But going back to what Josh said, I really like the idea of the enemies having bullets, like kind of a bullet hell, kind of like Doom's bullet hell, where there's a bullet every now and then. You're like, oh, it's moving so slow, I can just walk right around that, and that's a satisfying thing to do in itself. And then there's not much of the leading the target, but I wanted everything to be. I wanted it to feel like you were on the same ground as your enemies were, so just no ray casts at all. Just have everything be a projectile with the enemy's fire and the player's fire. And I've actually made a list of enemies, and the Charger is the only one that doesn't fire some sort of projectile, with the Mine Layer being sort of like a strange other case as well, where the Mine Layer is more like a third party that's only out for itself until it becomes pacified.
So then, to clarify, you're not trying to remove violence from the game entirely, you're just theming it a non-violent theme? Because your opposition is going to be violence in some way, right? Or do you have another way of expressing that?
Well, the whole idea with all the projectiles being food was that you are also like.
I don't mean your projectiles. I mean the enemies.
The enemy's projectiles would also be food.
Okay.
And they would be shoving so much food in your mouth that you would be falling asleep. Type of deal.
Okay. Interesting.
And I actually.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was actually playing around with the idea of a health bar just being a hunger meter, and instead of regenerating health, you're just getting hungry again.
Yeah. I think that's a perfectly valid way to go, but I think it would be a more interesting challenge to, if you want to push the nonviolent theme, I think there's a more elegant solution out there that you could find.
Your thing about having a hunger meter made me think of something. This might be orthogonal to what you want to do, but I'm going to throw it out there just because it's a weird idea that occurred to me. You know, typically in a shooter you have health and you don't want it to go down, and so you avoid getting hit by enemies. What if you turned that idea on its head, much like you were just talking about turning the idea of the health meter around into a hunger meter? Like, what if you took that a step further and turned it around to where your hunger meter is like, you know, you're always getting hungrier, right? Like a classic roguelike, and if you get too hungry, you die and the game is over, so you have to feed yourself. But the way you feed yourself is you smack the piñata enemies with your projectiles to get them to pop out candy, because that's what piñatas have inside of them. And so you hit, like you fire a projectile, and I don't know that your projectile's food at this point, you know, it makes more sense that you're chucking a ball or something, I don't know, but you hit an enemy with a projectile, he pops a piece of candy, kind of like dropping a pickup, but he pops the piece of candy with a behavior that's more like a projectile, and doesn't shoot it at you, he kind of shoots it away from you, so you have to actively move to get hit by the thing he popped out. So you shoot the enemy who's like running around and making himself a pain in the butt to hit in the first place. You shoot the enemy, he pops candy, you move to essentially catch the candy, and you have to just do that for as long as you can without starving.
Yeah,
I mean,
actually,
it's really weird, but it might have an interesting cadence.
yeah. So I have this down here. I remember we talked about this at the in-person meeting. I don't know how much you guys remember of that, or if even all of you were part of it, but I was talking about how you would, to get ammo for your gun, or to have food to throw at your enemies, however you want to put it, you would then go into like a receptive mode, kind of like in Ikaruga or whatever, and you were then trying to get hit by bullets to then have ammo to fire at other enemies. And I feel like that's kind of what you're saying, except like there'd be an enemy that was specifically for getting ammo, is kind of how I'm hearing it. Whereas, like, if you're doing it this way, you could, like, say, you know, like there was a guy shooting bullets in a, projectiles in a spread that wasn't. He wasn't. It doesn't look like they're really aiming at you. They're just firing a spray of bullets, and like in the chaos of the game, one guy just spraying bullets randomly is actually quite difficult to get around if you have another guy that's actually trying to hit you. And that could play really well into if you go into a mode where you're then trying to get hit.
What if say we go with the same thing of pinata candy enemy, and but instead of an enemy, he's actually your ally, and you're kind of guiding him through the level, and the hostile enemies aren't trying to kill you, but they're trying to kill your pinata guy. And so, but your pinata is also your source of ammo. So you're like shooting him to get ammo, but you're trying to stop enemies from killing him at the same time. And enemies could also hit you.
I'm thinking about the relationship between you fire projectiles, they're always physical projectiles, and then having this ammo absorption mechanic, which is basically, you could think of it as collecting an enemy's projectiles to shoot back at them, in essence, which makes me wonder, why not approach ammo in general the way Towerfall does, which is that when you fire an arrow, that's a thing that's in the world, and anyone can go pick it up and use it to shoot at somebody else. So, like when an enemy shoots at you, he doesn't just shoot an infinite stream of crap. You know, he's got his ball for whatever it is, and he throws his ball like a dodgeball game. And so you dodge it, so you don't get hit, yay, and the ball goes and hits a wall and falls on the floor. And you can run over and pick that ball up and throw it at him, but he's also going to try to run over and pick that ball up. Or if you threw one at him and missed, he's going to run over and try to pick that one up and throw it back at you, right? So there's a finite number of projectiles that ever exist in the system, and everybody is competing to pick them up and chuck them or shoot them at each other.
I like that idea.
All right. So I've got a list of a bunch more weapons, or a bunch more questions here. I don't know how much you guys are interested in talking about these that we haven't really already answered.
Yeah, I think the rest of your document up to this point they're all good ideas, and if you decide to take any of these routes, then they'll obviously help inform some of those changes there. And I think most of these questions are worth covering, spending some time on.
Do you have has any of the things we've talked about sounded a route you would be interested in taking that would diverge from your current plans?
I like the idea of, well, I like bits and pieces of everything, I think. Like, I like the idea of trying to subdue enemies in a non-projectile based way, having it be a more friendly thing than just projectiles being launched at each other. But I feel like that is like widely different from what I currently have right now. It would almost be like starting from scratch at that point, which I don't know if it's a good use of time. Like, that's what I'm trying to. That would be the problem with changing how you interacted with enemies. Is it's basically throwing out the whole design.
How much have you worked on this game?
Just a couple weeks.
Yeah, so my personal opinion is never be afraid to chop up your babies. Like, especially anything that's less than like 2 or 3 weeks. It's like nothing. Just like, don't even be scared to throw it in the garbage and start over. There's good enough or just good is the enemy of great, right? And you will get so much farther and have a much better game in the end if you establish yourself on fertile ground than if you try to make something work that because you have this time commitment in it. I can't think of the right word, but it's a bad thing to do, to feel like you're going to lose out on something because you've already put an investment in it, right?
You're talking about sunk cost.
Yeah. So if you have a sunk cost, like say you invest in a stock, and say you invested in BlackBerry right before the iPhone came out, and then BlackBerry starts going boom, 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 down, and you're like, well, I put all this time into it, I should just keep holding on to it, and then your value keeps sinking and sinking. Or if you just let go in that first few weeks, your losses would be much less than if you keep holding on to it. Like, you could invest that money somewhere else, and then you turn around and invest in an Apple, and then it continues to grow for the next X amount of years up until this point, right? And you're in a much better place than if you had continued to hold on to your not as fertile ground, right?
Yeah. So I understand that, and that makes very good sense. But all the other stuff that we talked about today does apply to this current build. But I guess it feels like that is a separate idea, and if I do that, I should just throw out everything I've told you guys tonight and start over, or we can continue to build on this and the other things I found interesting about this project.
Yeah. Well, it depends on whatever you find to be the most fertile ground. What's most interesting to you? What you're gonna, what you think can have the best result in the end.
I feel like I'll have to do soul searching on that, but for now I will table that idea and heavily consider it.
Yeah.
But for now, I think we should talk about what this turned into. And with that, I think it would be nice to talk about how effective the theme is if we're committing to this projectile-based game, like exactly as I have it set up here with all these weapons. Should I just switch to a violent theme, or should I try to conform it to something else, or what?
So I think if you go back up to the top and readdress your core, what are your core goals of it? Is it to make a game? Is like your core root goal and inspiration for doing this project to make a game that girls will like? If that's true, like if you want to make a first-person shooter that girls will like, you can still accomplish that within here by doing specific things, right? Which you can go on a process of discovery for. If your core main objective is to make a game that is just non-violent, that girls would like, but not necessarily have to be a traditional first-person shooter, then there's other things you can do. I think you want to decide what is the highest priority to you.
That's a good idea. So some of these are a little opposed to each other. Like females who enjoy first-person shooters exist, but that also might be a little in opposition with the whole non-violence thing. Whereas females who enjoy first-person shooters probably don't care if the game is violent, or at least a little bit violent. So maybe those two things don't really need to both be in there. And I can work towards like not having murder and blood in here, but
right.
like, just not like giving up on violence completely. Is what I'm trying to say. Maybe what this game is for right now.
Yeah. So if you're gonna keep, like, if you're okay with keeping some violence in there, like within, enemies are going to be aggressive towards you, right? Like that's some form of violence. If that level of violence is within your acceptable tolerance for your goals, then I think you can keep probably everything you have in here and skin it in a way that is pleasing to females, right? I think the idea of having angry-looking enemies that you subdue in some way, feeding them or whatever, and then they turn into big googly eyes, like cute things, would be really entertaining for a lot of girls, right? And just for guys, like that's a game that I would have fun playing.
Well, target audience doesn't mean we're alienating everyone else. We're just targeting one audience.
Yeah, but like that idea specifically is like the enemies are going to be angry and violent, right? But after they're subdued, they become cutesy and stuff. And I think that meets a lot of what you want to do, while still being somewhat violent. And so you can still keep all of that and what you've established here, what you've worked on in code and stuff. But there's other ways of doing it too, right? That's not the only way.
Okay. I will think heavily on whether to search for. It's funny because I have like a little bit of history of just making games for like the art of them or like the one-off idea of it, and those were like 2 or 3 week projects, and then they were done. So it feels like anything that I'm going to sculpt more time into has to have a deeper meaning to me, or like have a resonance with me in mechanics. I feel like I have to be in love with it a little bit to take it on in a longer term form than just a month or two. And I mean, you guys can speak for this yourselves, whether you felt that way when you played the game, but I feel like that's what I would need to have a project going that long. And like I said, I'll have to search and see if that is this game or if it's the game that Lyle was suggesting earlier.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've told you about the playtesting is like fire thing.
Go ahead and refresh my memory. I might have forgotten.
So this is one of the biggest lessons I learned when making my own stuff in the board game industry. I was working on a project and I was very excited about it, and I was getting other people excited about it, and I was building things up and polishing things out. And then I started doing some playtesting, and I didn't understand. Like I've always been kind of a I can see your point of view kind of thing. I can always see both sides of the issue. And so I was taking people's feedback, and I was like, yeah, that's a good mechanic. Okay, I'll add something like that in, and and I kept like accepting more of other people's ideas in, and what I didn't realize what I was doing is I was getting burned by the playtesting fire, because um, what you really have to do is, like you said, focus on what's going to motivate you, what you're passionate about, and it's also the same kind of principle as finding your core focus or the main goal of the project and using that to motivate all your decisions. But playtesting, once you let too many other ideas in, it can easily burn you out and make you feel like you've lost the main purpose of the goal, and that's what happened to me. I just suddenly felt burned out, and I didn't really know why. And so you just have to really be careful about playtesting, and when you're listening to other people's ideas, it's good to use the fire to fine tune or to hone things that you want to put under a critical, feedback edge, or to to consider whether this part should be cut out or what things that you might be missing. But always, always, never cut something or never add something just from one playtesting session. It's it's fundamentally important to the project that your motivation remains pure, and that since you're kind of this theme of the project, you have to figure out what's motivating you and stay true to that. So that's that big lesson that I had to learn.
I'm going to jump off that and say two things. One is that when I was at Lightbox, we did playtests all the freaking time. Internal playtests, mostly, every once in a while external playtests. And we kind of had an informal internal rule that we wouldn't make a change based on playtest feedback until that particular piece of feedback had come back at us at least 3 times. So that would eliminate a lot of the weird little things. We're like, oh, we had a playtest one day, and because we were having some weird network issues that day, that led to the game being a little laggy, and so everybody thought the rocket launcher sucked or something. We could have buffed the rocket launcher, but instead we waited and we just playtested again next time, and then the network issues were gone, and all of a sudden the rocket launcher was fine. You didn't hear about it again. So that was really helpful. And then on the finding the thing that motivates you front, I think for me what has been really useful there is trying to narrow the focus as much as possible. Like, with my shmup, so much of my focus is on the fact that I want that game to be really, really fluid. Like, that's why it takes place on the mouse, and I put all of the controls on the mouse and kept everything off the keyboard and stuff. Why I have the goal of keeping it at 60 frames per second, all that kind of stuff, because it's all about having more fluidity than normal shmups. And all the other stuff that's going on in the game, in my mind, is kind of incidental. Like, I care about it, but it's not the point. I could sacrifice, that particular art style if I needed to, or the style of music, or specific mechanics, and still feel good about making the game. But if I had to sacrifice the fluidity, then I would, just burn it, dump it, make a whole new game. So I don't know if you know yet what the one thing is in this game concept that feels like that to you, but if you don't know yet, it'd probably be super useful to put some mental effort into figuring that out.
Yeah, I think it rounds back to whether to, if fun is the core idea, which is kind of what I have written here at the top. We have fun's king. If that is my focus, then what I have laid out here kind of feels like accomplishes that. But the suggestion that Lau brings up of radically changing how you interact with the AI in the game is interesting to me, and I have made games in that vein before. Just I'll have to do a little soul searching to see whether it is what I want to do right now. Because I've only made one game that I feel is fun to play, and then a whole bunch of games that are not really fun to play, but kind of express ideas. And I have to decide whether I want to continue down that road or the fun road.
I will say, for what it's worth, on your theme, I'm shifting gears a little bit. Just personally, I feel like the strongest part of your theme is the parts where you talk about pinata stuff. Like, I would think it is really appealing to have a really like friendly, inviting, candy-colored shooter where I just bust pinatas. I just go around and I just shatter cute pinata animals and there's candy everywhere. That sounds really cool to me, like just from a thematic perspective. The part of your theme that's more about just like food in general, like I start imagining like throwing burgers at people and stuff, and that for me personally is less interesting as a theme. So, take that with a grain of salt. But that's my 2 cents on your theme. I think the pinata stuff sounds awesome, and the regular food stuff sounds less so.
Okay.
It's because Josh is addicted to candy. It's the crack speaking.
Actually, it just reminds me of Viva Pinata. It's totally nostalgia.
I was gonna mention your goal number 3, get faster at making games. I think that one, it doesn't matter what you're making for that one, but the more important thing is going to be how you approach making it, and how, like, the biggest thing is valuing your time, which you do from all our discussions that we've had, valuing your time and being acting accordingly, right? So really optimizing your workflow and being focused and dedicated when you are working, so that when you're not losing time on Twitter, Facebook, or other distractions, or losing your focus from just anything while you're in the middle of working. That's a big one. And then just being really deliberate about what you're doing and improving what you're doing. And so what I mean by that is, say you want to improve your estimating time on how long it takes you to do things, right? And so you say, I think it'll take me 30 minutes to do this. I'm challenging myself to do that. You sit down and do it. You track the time, see what it took you, and how long it took you. And you can do things like that and get better at programming that way, or whatever task you're doing. And it really depends on what the task is, but being really deliberate and trying to improve yourself is going to be the biggest key for doing that, independent of whatever you decide to make.
So you think that setting a goal for a task and then trying to meet that goal is a good way to speed up doing it?
Yeah, so nobody's going to get faster at anything. You're never going to know if you're getting faster. Like, if you're setting a goal to get faster, right, it makes sense to track and see if you actually are getting faster at something. And so there's no way of... So you're going to have to time yourself for different things. And it's hard because you're not going to ever be doing the exact same thing. You're basically going to get faster at making games by just having better experience, right? And being really... and just getting more knowledge and getting more familiarity with tools and that kind of stuff, right? So if your goal is to get faster at making games, then really the goal is become better at everything that involves making games. And so you just have to decide what you're trying to get, like what you're doing at that time, and how do you get better at doing that one thing. So
I guess the main focus of this project is like trying to learn how to work with 3D objects, and like I hadn't done anything with 3D stuff before, and I'm really excited to like have like this basic 3D Doom style environment made up of like nav meshes finding you and all that good stuff. And I would be interested in like suggestions of like what you think would be important to learn for a 3D programming challenge.
Josh or Josh would be better people to ask for that one.
So I think you just need to. It kind of depends on what you're looking for, but if you just imagine a few different scenarios, like I think what you've put in there, you've already at a high level learned a lot of the things that you need to know for the first-person shooter scenarios, but you just need to start doing some of the things, some other things that you see in other games, or you can just imagine some stuff. Like I've gained most of my experience from doing the different kinds of static 3D things that happen in the various games that I've had to do. There was a lot of sports games, and in those you have a lot of like flying cameras and different angles, and then just like placing models at the right places, character customization, playing animations at the right place and at the right time, and then having those animations play correctly while your player body is interacting with the physics world in the right places and the right times. Those are all good challenges for the high level that you're at right now. And then, of course, if you're looking for deeper 3D stuff, then you go into your linear algebra stuff, and I haven't even delved into that, writing a 3D engine or creating my own, generating my own list of polys or anything. But those are low-level things you could dig into too.
Well, part of the goal is to just be able to pump out a game as fast as possible. So high-level stuff is probably what I want more right now, as I'm not really interested in learning all the ins and outs of an engine or how to make an engine. I'm more interested in a finished product than I am in an engine that can use across multiple games.
So here's a few things that will. So probably the longest, the thing that takes the longest in making a game is like that discoverability process of figuring out what the game is, right? So there's some things you can do to make yourself better at that discoverability process, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe that's not the longest part of the development process. You can learn more game design stuff. Art of Game Design is a really good book that I would recommend you read through the whole thing, and it probably costs like $40. It's like a textbook, but it's worth every cent. So that's at a high level of decision making. So when you're working on things that matter in the long term. That will save you a lot of time of just going through that iteration and finding what's right. The other part is actually iterating fast and playtesting and doing things. So after you implement something, evaluate it, and don't go down paths that are going to be eventually unfruitful. Cut them off as fast as you can. Another thing, and this is more low-level type stuff, programming-wise, don't write unnecessary and don't write buggy code. Will save you a lot of time. And by that, examples, if you're writing public, or like if you're making all your variables private and then exposing all those variables and stuff, do it in a fast way if you're going to do it. Like I used to do C#. I do my game in XNA and stuff, right? So I used to write, like, when I'm declaring a new variable, I would do like private int blah blah, and then make a public accessor for it and different things. now I don't even write public. I don't write private anymore. That's like a small way of like gaining the time that it takes you to write private. But there's a small efficiency there. Other things that you can do to improve yourself as a programmer is when you find a bug, identify what caused you to create that bug. Like, was it because you copy and pasted this code and you didn't look at, and you changed all the variables that you were supposed to change and you didn't change one of them and you didn't like catch that one? If that's the reason, then look at how to resolve that problem. If you had a bug for, like there's probably 100 examples I could give you, but look at what caused that bug. Not what caused the bug in the code, but what caused you mentally to make that mistake. And then try to correct that in future programming. Yeah, there you go.
That's good advice.
All right. I think that's all I have, unless anyone wants to say something else.
So you don't.
I'll throw out one quick Unity tip that's just a thing that I randomly happened to notice. It's a very small thing. It has nothing to do with anything else we've talked about so far. When you play the game right now, if you run up to a wall and turn, you'll see that your little gun hand representation will like clip into the wall. The easiest way, like the most quick and dirty, simple way to resolve that is to render the gun on a separate camera. So if you make a second camera and set it with all of the same settings as the first, and then change the camera's culling mask to only render one particular layer, like make a gun layer, and then put the gun geometry on that layer, and then set the camera's depth 1 higher, then what will end up happening is you'll render your scene camera and it'll render the entire scene and everything just like you do right now. And then after that's done, then the second camera will render on top of that, and the only geometry it'll render will be the gun geometry. And then that way the gun will never clip.
I'm going to sadden you a little and let you know that gun thing is just the emitter, and it's just kind of placeholder right now. What I am going to do is just make a GUI layer, and it's just going to be a flat image of whatever's firing the projectiles. And that's just where we're coming at it.
That's a really cool trick.
What did you guys think of just how it played as it is? Was it enjoyable? Was it?
It throws me a little bit that because the fade doesn't work, I don't really know that I've died, right? Like there's not something that happens immediately. So I'm dead and I'm still kind of running around for a second and then I reset. So that's a little confusing. And tuning-wise, if it were me, just because I'm a kinesthetics nut, I like the fact that you move around really fast. That feels nice and old school, arcadey, doomy FPS. I think the acceleration and deceleration is a little bit floaty. Like I would accelerate to top speed quicker, and I would decelerate to a stop quicker. Particularly the deceleration, which causes me to feel a little bit like I'm skating on ice. And I don't know how your jump is implemented right now. Jumps are a pain in the butt to get to feel just so. Straight up physics jumps, where you're like literally a rigid body and you add an upward force and let gravity handle it, usually feel like terrible. They feel like floaty and gross. And I kind of have that problem with the jump in this game right now. Like I feel like I want the jump to snap me up faster, not further, but I want to like reach the apex of my jump a lot faster than I do, and kind of feel like I hold for just a moment and then drop down quickly. Whereas right now I feel like I kind of drift up and then drift down. So those are just a couple of quick off the top of my head kinesthetic things to like tighten it all up.
One thing that I would say that goes back to the productivity thing and is related to this is first determine if your game needs a jump before you fine-tune the jump.
Yeah, I'm actually using the default controller right now, and I'm slowly taking out pieces that I don't like and replacing them with my own pieces as I learn how to make a first-person character controller. And right now, you don't even need a jump really. I mean, there's funny little things you can do with the jump as it is right now, but nothing that you ever really want to use. So you're right. I would either have to make a use for the jump or remove it. There's no use for the jump.
If you don't plan on having multi-level arenas, you might be better off just removing it. Because if you have it, and you also have like rocket-type weapons, then the next thing is, well, I, as an old-school gamer, am going to expect to be able to rocket jump. Well, that's a whole new thing that you need to tune. And then if I can rocket jump, I'm going to also be able to expect to like ride slopes on walls appropriately, and that's a whole other physics thing you need to tune, right? And then when those things aren't there, then people are going to be like, oh, what the hell? I have all the pieces to rocket jump, and it doesn't work. So, there's that.
Yep.
That's funny. I never even tried to jump. It wasn't in the list. That's kind of funny. But I felt the demo was fine. Now that Josh mentions it, I feel like all of his feedback was valid. But for me, it was a pretty interesting challenge. Like I did get immersed enough to be like, oh man, is there an exploding thing around this corner? Or they're going to come get me. And it was really hard. It was really challenging, which... maybe that's your hallmark, but it felt fine to me. I felt like it was a good, valid demo and a good, valid approach, and I didn't really have any design complaints as far as that demo.
I agree with what they said. I think the strength. If I was going to point out one strength that you have in your demo, it's that you can't just run around and blast everything. You have to be more deliberate about your choices. You can't just run around a corner shooting because you're going to die if you do that. So there can be surprises around corners, and that has to do partly with how you set up the level and how the level functions. So those are nuggets you can take and use or not use depending on which direction you end up going with the game, right? But I liked that aspect of it.
I'm really interested to see what adding a shooting enemy does to the dynamics of this. Like, if the guy's shooting just on the back of you, how does it feel now? In addition to the charging guys.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Unless you guys have anything else, I will wrap this up.
It's good.
I'm good.
Word.
All right. This has been another Raptor Circus feedback session. I'll just let us all have a chance to sign off and give out their information if they want to. Let's start with you, Baser.
With who?
Baser.
Alright, hey, I'm Vaser. Just a quick announcement. Next week is Final Burn, so if you're here in Utah, be sure to come on out. You can find that by searching out igda.org/SLC and check out the mailing list that you can find there. And yeah, hit me up. My email is vazor222@gmail.com. VAZOR222.
All right, Josh Sutton, sorry.
And I am Josh Sutphin, and I am making a game called Legacy of the Elder Star, and it is awesome. It's at elderstargame.com, and you can find me on Twitter at Invicticide.
And Lyle.
Lyle Cox. You can find me at Lyle Cox on Twitter, LYLECOX. I'm making a game called Together Omni and Safe, which you can find at togetherthegame.com.
All right. I'm Vince Betteridge. I host Raptor Circus, and I make silly villains too. Maybe not as silly villain as this, or maybe more silly than this. And I have a Twitter, Vince Betteridge. If you help me find it, I will respond to you and talk to you and have a good time. And maybe get you in one of these calls if you really want to. Other than that, we'll see you next time.